Good morning, class of 2020. Hope you're doing great. We're getting down to the end of the semester here, and we've last week you did your final assessment. The other day I gave you the 11 things that Bill Gates feels they didn't teach in high school, and you got to give an opinion about that. Remember, that was for extra credit. Today's lesson is just some learning beyond the curriculum this semester. And if you would like some extra credit, then what I'd like you to do today is just on a Google Doc, just jot down some bullet points, some notes from the topics today. Maybe write a 1 or 2 paragraph summary. And again, this is extra credit. Um, but what I like to do every year is I like to give Mr. Roper's tips for building a great resume and preparing for a job interview. And if you remember, in early April, you did a Google Classroom lesson about you looked up tips for building a resume. You looked up tips for preparing for a job interview. I showed you a couple crash course videos, and then you did your human capital assignment when you kind of researched a career that you might possibly be interested in. And what I'd like to do is just give you from my own experience. I've been teaching 21 years. I've worked at 4 different high schools. That means I've been hired at 4 different places. I've also been turned down at some places. So I've probably been on about, I don't know, 8 to 10 job interviews in my life, so I have some experience with this. And just want to give you some thoughts. This is something you can save that maybe can help you in the future. I want to say this, though. A lot of the advice I'm going to give you today, I got to give credit where credit's due. In 2002, 2003, I went back to school to Azusa Pacific University. I was going to school at night, and there was a guy by the name of Ray Plutko. Ray Plutko was a principal at the time, and he was the professor of my class, and he gave out these handouts, Plutko's tips for a great resume and job interview. And I got to tell you, I feel the man knew what he was talking about. I've used a lot of his advice throughout my career, so this is really Mr. Plutko's tips for building a resume and preparing for a job interview, but it's coming from the mouth of Mr. Roper, so we'll call it Mr. Roper's tips. And again, if you want to jot down your thoughts, your bullet points, some paragraphs for extra credit, I can apply that to your grade if you've requested a grade. And if you don't want to do it and just want to listen, this is some good advice for you in the future. So let's get to it. So your resume. And you probably saw this when you looked this up. Your basic resume should be 1 page in length. If you think about it, a organization they don't have time to read more than a page. So highlighting all your work experience, your accomplishments, your resume, you want to keep that to a page. Where you want to kill it is your cover letter. Your cover letter becomes you turn your cover letter in with your resume. And on your cover letter, you're highlighting your accomplishments, but you want to show your excitement for the firm. You want to connect why you would be a great fit at whatever firm you're applying for. And so it's not just about how awesome you are. You want to tell them how awesome they are and why the two of you would make a great marriage. Now, what I'm going to advise next is out of the box. If you were to look at Mr. Roper's resume, before I have my objective and my work experience and all the things you saw on the line when you saw how to build a resume, I've listed personal characteristics. So if you were to look at my resume, you would see that my height is 6 feet, my weight is 180, my race is I'm Caucasian, my marital status is I'm single, I have no children, I'm 42, and I'm in excellent health. And so why do I do this? Think about this. Maybe pause for a second. Think about, why does Mr. Roper do this, and why did Mr. Plutko advise Mr. Roper to have these personal characteristics? So when I send in a resume before I go on an interview, this gives the person a visual of who I am. And I've been on a few job interviews where they're like, you kind of look about what we thought you would look like. I'm a pretty relatively tall single white dude that's 42. I'm in good shape, good health, and I'm just trying to give the person a visual of who I am. Now I have to say this, okay? This can work one of two ways. So, if you use this advice when you're applying for a job, you need to understand that this is a bit of a risk. So I've applied for jobs before where I did the interview and they said, "Hey, we love that resume. We love how you listed the personal characteristics. We've never seen that before." That kind of sets you apart from the competition. But I got to be honest with you, there were a couple of jobs that I applied for where I didn't even get an interview, and I thought I was a pretty formidable applicant. So I called them and asked them, why did I not get an interview? And they said, your resume it was kind of strange. It was kind of put us off a little bit. Like, why would we need to know your height and your weight and your race and your marital status, your age? Like, we don't see why that was relevant. So listing your personal characteristics, I've had companies that love that idea, and I've also had some companies that didn't care for the idea at all. So, you could use this advice and it could work for you, but also it could backfire. There's some people that don't like it. So, it's a risk. It's definitely going to set you apart from the competition, but it could set you apart in a good way or it could set you apart in a bad way. So, some people have loved this idea and some people didn't care for it all. They did not like the idea. So if you use the idea and someone doesn't like it, remember that I've told you there's two ways that this can play out. Do not be angry with me. Do not reach out to me on social media or via email. I mean, you're welcome after your high school career to reach out. I'd love to know how you're doing, but don't blame me for not getting the job if this hurts you, because I'm telling you right now that this is a risk. This can really help, or it could affect you in a negative way. So it's really up to you whether you want to list the personal characteristics or not. Now, preparing for the job interview. Here is Mr. Roper's advice for preparing for the job interview. I always say drive out the day before or a few days before. If you don't know where the job is, if you've never been to the firm, if you don't know how to get there, the last thing you want to do is be late on the day of the interview. And the other thing is, have you ever noticed the very first time you go somewhere, there's a level of anxiety, like how much further, how much further, how much further, and you're constantly looking at the clock. You want to be a cool customer the day of the interview, so you want to get that anxiety out the day before or a few days before. So anytime I interview at a school for a new job, I always drive out to the school the day before to see where it's at. Now, I'll give you some interesting, a funny story. When I was interviewing for the job at GAR, I drove out a couple days before for the interview to see how far it was to GAR from where I was living. And, I kind of walked around the campus, and I came up to the gym, and I thought, I'm applying to be a teacher and basketball coach. Let me see what this gym looks like. So I went into the gym, and they were having a summer league. And there were a couple kids taking money, and they said, "Excuse me, it's $5 to come in for the summer league." And I said, "Look, I'm not staying. I just want to look around for about 90 seconds, and I'll be out of here. Is that okay?" And they said, "Sure." And as soon as I walked in, these high school teeny boppers, they start going 1, 2, 3, 4. They're giving me a 90-second count. So you can imagine their surprise after they kind of gave me a hard time 2 weeks later when they announced the new coach, and it's this guy. So they were quite embarrassed. But I got to tell you, I thought it was pretty funny what they did. It was all in good fun. So you want to go out the day before. The day of the interview, you want to arrive about 15 minutes early. That way you can go over any final notes, use the restroom if you have to. You don't want to be 30 minutes early. Usually, a lot of times, the person before you might be interviewing. They do in 30-minute segments. You don't want to be waiting with someone else at the same time when they're about to interview, then you're going to interview. 30 minutes is just a little too early. 5 minutes, that's cutting it close. So you want to be there about 15 minutes early so you can go to the mirror, make sure everything's looking perfect with your outfit. Get a swig of water, use the restroom, wash your hands, and you're ready to go. Now, the first 30 seconds is all about that first impression. You may need to practice this in the mirror if you have to. You're not going to get the job in the first 30 seconds, but you can lose the job in the first 30 seconds. So it's interesting. When I used to demonstrate this at GAR, I would walk outside of my classroom and I would make an entrance on what the entrance would look like. We used to actually set up mock interviews. We would have done this in your class had we stayed with traditional learning in the classroom. And I used to always say the first 30 seconds, what is key is a firm handshake and eye contact. Well, a firm handshake. We live in a new world in 2020. So if you interview for a job in the next year or 2 years, a firm handshake, I don't know if that'll be protocol again. So the first 30 seconds, you want to come in, you want to be confident, you want to make eye contact. But I don't know, it might be like a cool point, just a wave. I don't know when handshakes, when they're going to bring those back. So, when they bring handshakes back, that's key. But until then, until we're back to shaking hands, again, a point, a nod, a wave, just something cool and confident. Okay? Now, when you are answering questions, you remember you Googled typical questions that they'll have at an interview. You want to keep your answers short and sweet. Early on when I was young, and I remember in 2003, I was teaching at A.B. Miller High School, but I was the assistant basketball coach, and I wanted to be a head coach. And so I had an interview at Claremont High School, and I just wanted to show them I was just the greatest coach in the world. I mean, I was the next Phil Jackson. And I just went on and on and on and on. I mean, I think I even stood up and demonstrated like a dribbling shooting move or something like that. I mean, I had tons of enthusiasm, but I was overdoing it. And basically, my answers were too long. And we'll get back to that. Posture, poise, and enthusiasm while you're giving the interview. And you might need to practice this. You want to place your hands a certain way. You don't want to rock back and forth in your seat. You want a good posture. You want to be poised. You don't want to be rattled. And enthusiasm, but a appropriate level of enthusiasm. Again, when I messed up that interview at Claremont, I was overly enthusiastic. I mean, I was sweating. I was just, I was doing too much. I was doing the most. Now, have a portfolio for each person that's interviewing you. So when you do an interview, I think it's a great idea. And this is old school because now we send everything online. But I would have a portfolio bound in a folder. You can do this, at Staples or Office Max. And basically just have a portfolio. So like my portfolio would have sample lesson plans, practice plans for coaching, fundraising plans, how I would fundraise, individual conference sheets, what I would talk about with players individually. Just let's get to the next point. Anticipate questions. Your portfolio should fit with that. So you want to try to anticipate the questions they're going to ask you, general questions and then questions that pertain to your firm. So, if they were to ask me, what is your grading policy, then I would say, turn to this page in your portfolio. What does a practice look like with Coach Roper? Turn to this page in your portfolio. Here's my practice plan. What do you do for off-season conditioning? Turn to this page. What are you going to do when you take over this program? What's the first thing you do? I have a sheet that says list of things to do when taking over. What do you do in the off season? What do you do in the summer? So any question, how do you deal with parents? I'd have a handout for what we discuss at our parent meeting, what we discuss at back to school night. Um, so as much as you can, you want to have your answers in this portfolio. Find out before you interview. Ask how many people will be at the interview, so you have a copy for each person. What I would advise is one time, I'll get back to this. Um, Research the company. When I do an interview, I know everything about the school. So when I interviewed at GAR, I went on the website. I looked up the academic statistics. I looked up everything from the basketball team. Um, I knew most firms have a mission statement. They have core values. So you want to know the mission statement of the company. You want to know the core values of the company. And then you want to discuss how your values intertwine with the core values of the company, or your philosophies, your techniques, what makes you special as an applicant fits in. So like when they ask me questions about, you're down one, what play do you run, 9 seconds left? Well, I had gone on Max Preps, researched the kids, so I said, well, I would give Devon Potts the ball here, I'd put John Benson here, I'd put Michael Alvarez here. Those were the players that played for the team at that time. And so you want to show the company that not only should they want you, you want to show them how bad you want to be there. I mean, you want to show them, how motivated you are to add to their company. And this is any company. Hey, if you need a job and you're in college and you're trying to put some money in your pocket and you're interviewing at Walmart, Walmart has a mission statement. Walmart has core values. Show them that you've done your research. Show them how bad on fire you are to work for Walmart or work for In-N-Out Burger or wherever you're applying for the job. Know everything about that company. Okay? Don't ask negotiation questions until you have the job. So at the end of the interview, they'll typically ask you, do you have any questions? Ask something polite, but don't ask them, well, can I get these hours? Can I get weekends off? How much are you going to pay me? Don't ask any of that until they offer you the job. Once they offer you the job, if they really want you, now you might have some room to negotiate. But be careful. If you're just starting out in your career and they have, lots of choices for who they want to hire, I wouldn't be too brave with the negotiating. If the company has sought you out, you're a veteran, you've been doing your thing, then you have a little more power at the negotiation table. But don't ask any type of how much am I getting paid, am I getting holidays off, weekends off, until you have the job. Now, here's a big one. Follow up if you don't get the job. So this is where you got to put your ego aside, you got to swallow your pride. If you do not get hired, call and ask why. So let's go back to my example. 2003, I want to be a head coach, and I'm interviewing at Claremont High School, and they don't hire me. So I call the athletic director, and I just respectfully ask him, I just want to know why you guys didn't hire me or what I could have done better at the interview. And he goes, we appreciate that you're young and you're full of enthusiasm, but to be honest with you, you kind of come off as a used car salesman. You talk too much. That hurt. That hurt to hear. That was not friendly advice, or it was friendly advice. It just it was not nice to hear. No one likes to know that they didn't do such a great job with certain aspects of things they feel passionate about. But yeah, he basically told me I talk too much, and then he said, the portfolio was great, but you looked at the portfolio while you were giving the interview, so that made us question if you really knew your stuff or you just were kind of using a cheat sheet. So back to the portfolio, you give let's say 3 people are interviewing you, they ask you a question. Example in my career, Coach Roper, what's your program in the weight room? We'll turn to page 25. Now, while I'm going over the program in the weight room, I'm telling them what's on page 25, but I'm not looking at the portfolio. They can look at the portfolio, but I'm just, making eye contact with the people I'm interviewing with, and I'm not I'm not looking at that thing because, I'm showing them that I know this information. This portfolio is not for me as a cheat sheet. It's for you as a guide, or you can further study me when the interview is over. And so it was March of 2003, and I don't get the job. Well, 2 months later, Nogales High School comes calling. And so it's May or June of 2003, and I get an interview with Nogales High School. And I clean it up with the portfolio. I'm in command of the room. The portfolio is just a guide for the people that are interviewing me. I keep my answers a little short, a little sweet. I'm enthusiastic, but I'm not overdoing it. And guess what? I got hired the day of the interview. But I must say this, I was driving home and I realized the basketball team at Nogales was horrible at the time. They had finished in last place 3 years in a row. So I thought to myself, either I just gave the world's greatest interview to be hired the day of the job, or they're really desperate for a coach. And think about it, I wanted to be a head coach, and I was 26, and that was very young to be a head coach at that time. So that's the other thing you got to understand in your career. Sometimes, as Drake said, you got to start from the bottom. I'm proud to say that Nogales had finished in last place 3 years in a row. My very first year, finished in last place again. So that was 4 years in a row in last place. But my second year, we finished in first place. And so that was a very awesome accomplishment, something I'm proud of. Those were great kids that I had the pleasure of working with. And I was at Nogales for 7 years. And then I moved on to GAR. And by the time I interviewed at GAR, I was had a lot more experience. I was a veteran, and I was able to give an even better interview. GAR did not hire me the day of the interview because it was an excellent team and they had a lot of excellent applicants, and I was very blessed to get the job. But I probably don't get those two jobs though if I don't call and follow up to ask why I didn't get the job. So if you don't get hired, do not be too proud to ask why. Or if you're working at a firm and you don't get a promotion, anytime something doesn't work out in your career, you want to know why. And so that wraps up today's lesson. I just want to tell you how proud I am of the class of 2020. This has been a year. I've been in education for 21 years. This is the craziest thing I've ever seen. And you guys have handled this with a lot of class and dignity. And I'll check in next week with one last message. But I just want to say how proud I am of everyone. And congrats on your graduation. And email me if you ever need anything in life. I want to wish you all the best on your future academic endeavors. I know you'll do great, and stay strong. We are going to get through this, and there are going to be great days ahead for all of us. And best of luck to everyone. And if you have any questions about my tips for a resume or preparing for a job interview, give me an email. In the future, if you're ever getting ready to prepare for an interview and you want to even chat about it over the phone, give me a shout out, and maybe, or we can email. Maybe I can give you a call with some tips, with some advice. But just, I'm here to help in the future. The faculty, we care about you guys, and you guys are gladiators for life. And it's been a great experience, a GAR-rate experience working with you. And I've said this before, I really enjoyed the lessons that you've continued to, and the papers you've continued to write as we've been through online learning, and I appreciate your efforts. And you guys enjoy your weekend, and we got that virtual graduation coming up pretty soon.